My, that last panel was fire. Oh my God, I feel so enthused and charged up. It's amazing. Hello, and thank you for joining us for the second annual AfroAnimation Virtual Summit. We thank all our hosts and sponsors for putting together this event of art, culture, expression, and enterprise. I know, I'm not even going to say I hope, I know you guys have been enjoying today's topics because I definitely have. I'm Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics, your moderator for this finale session. Oh my God, I can't believe this has been so good. It's phenomenal, and I can't wait to bring this on home and make sure that you guys have had the best time ever. It is my immense pleasure to welcome our panelists for this final block: fan-based community building, kickstarting, bootstrapping tips for creators. Joining us today, we have Terrence Day. Hey, Terrence, how are we doing today? Oh, we still got you muted.
I'm here.
Hey, there we go.
Can you hear me? I'm good.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Nice strong, man.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Keith Miller.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Hey, Keith. Yeah, we got you. Wonderful. Now, I want to make sure I'm saying this correctly. Liz Cook Mao, or is it? Did I say that correctly?
That's right. Perfect.
Yes. I'm not saying I practiced, but I did. So, hello, Liz. How we doing? Certainly not least, Harold Hayes joins us, and we're about to have some big fun. This is such a huge space to talk about when you're talking about crowdfunding, bootstraps, grassroots material. Let's talk about this. What was the first project that you saw that made you want to be in this space, this creative outlet space of saying, I can do that? Terrence, can we start you off?
Yeah, of course. Just so I understood, you're saying like, what was the first thing that kind of made me realize I wanted to do filmmaking? Or
yes, specifically okay, filmmaking. Cool. Yeah.
Well, of course, I'm a poet and a filmmaker from New York. My name is Terrence, and I always say I didn't realize it's like this has been like a recent revelation of mine, but one of the first early things that I saw that really moved and inspired me was like Hunchback of Notre Dame, and even like a lot of Castle in the Sky by Hayao Miyazaki. Like these are things that I saw very early on that I knew I wanted to make stories and tell stories. And I think kind of moving into I started pursuing live action and really wasn't as happy in that space, but the art of storytelling, and it's only just kind of now and we'll talk about with Pretty that I've kind of realized this animation has always been there and I've always loved it, and so I'm really excited for this kind of next chapter in my career.
Oh, that's amazing. Keith, I'm asking you to follow up with that one.
Yes, I mean, it's funny because when I think about it, I watched a lot of cartoons growing up, but I particularly remember when Space Jam came out.
Okay.
And I have never seen so much fervor and excitement in the community where I lived, where we didn't get to necessarily get access to certain things. And so I think that that kickstarted and not only kind of showed what was possible with animation, but that animation could live against the complexity of live action as well, and that we could really have fun with it.
I love that. Liz?
I think for me, like growing up and being able to go to Blockbuster on like a Friday night and just choose whatever movie you could find, really like started it. And I've just been kind of following a career of trying to help independent artists and filmmakers fund and get their work out there.
I love that. For the younger audience out there, yes, that used to be like a Friday joint where we would go figure out what we were going to have for dinner and then go to the video store, and it was magic. It was absolute magic. Harold, what about you?
Let's see. So I think I basically started watching animation since I was a little boy. Like I'm a military kid, so I lived in Germany for a long time, and there's a lot of anime. So I watched like a lot of 70s anime.
Oh, nice.
So I was with it for that type of animation for a long time. I've seen it grow, and I have my favorites. But then I think when it really started to influence me was when my parents would say, "Oh, there's a making of the movie on," and I would like rush to go see it and just be amazed at all the wizardry that went behind it. And I started to realize that it was a craft, and I wanted to be a part of that craft.
Oh my God, that's brilliant and perfect. And I, like you, I totally understand it, because I'm that guy that likes to watch the documentaries about how something is made, because it does give you that, not just the secret sauce, but it shows you that this was made by people. So let's parlay that right into you're making the decision to not only want to pursue this, but you create avenues for yourself, independent businesses, to build just that outlook. Tell me about Sunny Boy Entertainment, if you don't mind. We'll start backwards.
Sure. Sunny Boy Entertainment is owned by myself and my business partner Craig Phillips. We met in college. We call ourselves a content marketing team, but we're storytellers straight up. Just that is the through line for everything we do. It's always a story. It's always a narrative. What is that story? Otherwise, I don't know what we're doing.
Stories are everything. I agree with that.
Yeah. So essentially, as our bread and butter work is out there making marketing content for major motion picture films, mostly, and some TV. But I go on movie sets. I've probably been on more movies than most directors, and I watch them make their movies. I document those things and create content. The cool thing about it is that a lot of studios come to us in order to figure out a unique way to kind of get their stuff out there and sell it, because they know we're filmmakers as well. We make motion comics, our own stuff, running our own film festivals. We have a book out called King's and the Magicians Lost and Found, which is a novel published by Penguin Random House, and it's now becoming a major motion picture film with
awesome,
with Disney Plus. So we tell stories on a lot of different levels, and I think that's kind of why we've been successful thus far.
I love that. Terrence, Keith, I know you guys have a partnership with Pretty. Tell us about that.
You kick it up, Terrence, and I'll color us out the last.
Okay, cool. I'll let my little hand up. Well, Pretty all began with Keith. Keith had a book that he sent me. As I mentioned, I had been in live action for a little bit, and I was actually kind of ready to step away from filmmaking. And along these lines, Keith had shared an unpublished manuscript with me, which would become, Pretty. And I after I had read it, loved how audacious it was in its storytelling. It was a queer Black coming of age story that took place in the Deep South, and that sort of saw this larger journey and arc of this young character named Jay just trying to belong and trying to be seen. And I was just really moved by it, and I was just moved by how Keith invited so much complexity in all of the characters. And I needed that. I was sort of finding myself needing content that I was not seeing out in the world. And I kind of felt that calling again of like, you can't run away from this. You got to just sort of lean into it. And so I approached Keith about developing it into a short film, which, we sort of embarked on together, developing that. And then when COVID hit, a week before our production was supposed to go,
wow,
we had the really beautiful and I would say life-affirming and life-changing experience of pivoting into animation and discovering just how few stories of color and the queer coming of age genre exist in animation, and just how kind of high that threshold was. And we saw the budget explode, we saw the timeline explode, and we said, we're just going to go for it because we believe even more in this story now, especially in this medium. And so it's been an incredible journey, and I'll pass it off to Keith to color in the lines.
Yeah, I'll just be super quick. So at the time that I met Terrence, I was a nonprofit executive working and training with, young people in the community on how to do everything from slam poetry to theater, etc. But the most probably important thing to note is that I had given up on the possibility that my own stories like Pretty could see the light of day because I was told they couldn't. And so when Terrence came back and, gave me those words, I was like, word, okay. Well, then we might be able to do this. I did not know what an executive producer was. Didn't even know what a producer was. But the nonprofit work allowed me to slide right on in.
Right.
And what's interesting is that I was able to then foreground the possibility and the reality that all of the work that I had built upon, whether it be the research, whether it be community organizing, it still stemmed from this idea that when Black and brown boys play, they heal. That's what the research shows. And so being able to take that and tell that story across multiple mediums allowed me and Terrence to want to heal from our own stuff, but also be able to figure out the ways in which we could find a community that will allow us to champion this work and then do so much more afterwards.
That's church right there. That's church. That needs an offering plate to be spread around. And speaking of offering plates, Liz, okay, so you didn't start Kickstarter, I'm guessing, but how did you get involved with Kickstarter? And I definitely want to talk about the goal and the way that the platform has really kind of kicked down the doors and opened up opportunities for everyone.
Yeah, so, and I have to apologize. There's some construction going on next door, so I'm going to try and mute when I can. But yeah, I started a Kickstarter almost 9 years ago. So I didn't start the company, not even close, but I have been there the longest out of anybody right now at the whole company. So the gray hairs are there, but yeah, I mean, the whole idea of Kickstarter really came about basically, you know, the idea that there are probably a lot of people that care about supporting a specific creative project that wouldn't be able to come in, you know, with like, you know, 50 grand or even, you know, 10 grand or whatever. They would definitely be happy to pitch in 25 bucks, 50 bucks, you know, whatever they could. And collectively, could help bring a creative project to life that a community cares about. And it's been amazing to see. I mean, there's been over $4 billion pledged to creative projects in the last 13 years. It's actually Kickstarter's birthday today. Like it started.
Oh, happy birthday, Kickstarter.
Yeah. So,
oh, yes.
I mean, it's been kind of a crazy journey. And what we have seen is like people really care about supporting creative projects and art. It's like, it's the thing that I feel like gets cut the fastest out of our school systems and like is sort of like the least credited. And yet it has been, you know, oh yeah, like I said, like over $4 billion pledged from people who aren't getting a financial return on that investment, except for the knowledge of, you know, supporting and being a part of a creative process with somebody. And we have seen that it has allowed a lot of projects that may not have otherwise gotten funding or seen the light of day because for whatever reason, certain gatekeepers in different communities like wouldn't be focused on that story, that storyteller, you know, any number of things. So my entry into Kickstarter was actually coming from the distribution side. I was in an independent distribution company for film, mostly documentary, but some narrative. And I was getting a little bit disenchanted with that because I was like, oh man, it's the end of the journey. Sometimes these checks are just so small that I'm like, I want to help in the very exciting idea phase of things. I want to be part of the journey of that instead of like the very tail end of when the person's like crossed the finish line like Haggard. And so that's kind of like how I transitioned into doing the film side of stuff at Kickstarter.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Okay, so all of you have had a unique situation where you've got a concept, you've got a project that you want to bring to market, but there comes a certain point where you recognize that your particular or personal skill sets isn't enough to get you across that finish line. What are some of your rubrics to help you understand, like, okay, now's the time that I need to bring someone else in, even if that is a matter of a collaborative partner, as in the case of Terrence and Keith, or financial backing by way of a platform? And whoever wants to jump on that one, that's a big question.
I'll hop in really quickly on it. Just because, you know, when we pivoted into animation, you know, obviously we had a lot of a learning curve that we had to kind of figure out. And so the first thing that I did, because I had the idea, kind of like I hadn't shared it with the rest of my team, which at that time comprised of Keith F. Miller, Natalie Harris, and Jeremy Churong, a kind of really dope queer, you know, POC production team. Before I kind of shared it with them, I knew that I wanted to bring something to the table, like a vision to them. And so I started to just do research right away and started to look up other directors who had produced or had made, you know, short films specifically of a sizable nature and specifically like, you know, kind of in the queer coming of age genre. I couldn't find a lot, but what I did find, you know, I reached out, did cold calls to those directors and met with them. And one of them was the creator behind Tuskegee Airs, Marcus Williams, I believe his name is, and he had a Kickstarter, and he's the one who directed us to Powerhouse Animation. Nice. And I sort of cold called Powerhouse, you know, just sort of emailed them, and they were like, yeah, send us what you got. And so, we had all this stuff from the live action, to kind of be able to say like, hey, we want it to look like this and we want it to feel like that. And I'm, as a fan of Hayao Miyazaki, never got to see myself in those films, but loved the pacing, loved the tone, and just the languor and the romanticism of that work. And so I said, I want to see myself in that. And so that was the kind of vision I communicated to them. And then they wrote back with a budget, and I ran back to the team and was like, can we do this? Can we make it happen? And thankfully they all caught on board. And so, we knew that we needed additional folks. And so we just started to look up, inform ourselves, find the people who were out there, reach out to them. And more than anything, I think as a team, just the organization and the teamwork of us meeting every other Sunday, we would just kind of, during the pandemic, we would just kind of talk and say what our big sky dreams were for what we could do and how we could get the Kickstarter and how it could look, and just started to pull in resources from there. And so
awesome.
It came out very organically.
I love that. I love the intersection of comics and animation. Obviously, comics is my field. So big shout out to the Tuskegee Airs crew, Greg Burnham and Marcus Williams.
One thing I would just add is the part that Terrence left out that I think is most important is that up to that point, I thought we were making another Moonlight. Right.
Okay.
And so Terrence brings, the animation idea, and I'm like, that's not Moonlight. And so when he begins to, I was like, okay, cool. Where are your comps? Like, let me see. And when he began to realize, I was like, where are your comps? Where are examples of people having done this? And he was like, there are none. Right. Then I was like, terrified. We have to do it.
Yep.
Right. And so I think never forget also the reality that I've had many, many, many jobs. I think a lot of us have. And so my first career was in marketing and communications and design. And so I think what was really powerful is that in the face of a pandemic, in the face of the world saying no and all these things, fear, all of that, our team said, well, if it doesn't exist, then what's the worst that can happen? At least we can fight for it. And so I think not only was collaboration important, and we kind of pooled all of our skills together, and every step of the way we were communicative about our need and our gaps of knowledge, and to see the world and the village stand up and help us every step of the way, including the big greats like Powerhouse, was really huge.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Harold?
So I've had like a few stages of that where I've had to pull in other resources. You know that you definitely can't do everything yourself. So one of the ones I'll go back to, not a particular project, but when we started working in virtual reality, virtual reality, I think was it 2014, something like that. It started to come about strong, and my buddy and I were trying to like sell or trying to like figure out a movie idea, and we wanted to find this location called Castle Green in Pasadena, and we wanted to show this location to some people, and we like they're never gonna leave the office and come check it out. So we found a friend who had like a little 4 GoPro rig thing. No, it was a 2 GoPro rig thing, stereoscopic thing that he 3D printed the little holder onto it.
Wow.
And I was like, man, this is some seriously jerry-rigged stuff, right? But it worked. Like we filmed this cool castle, and then stitched it together and put it in a headset and started showing it to these executives. And they felt like they were there. But even then, I still didn't just show images. I like put it into like a little story, like a little walkthrough. And I just saw how transformative it was to the experience of like them feeling like they were present and immersed at this place when they weren't, they never left the office. So I realized like, it took me down this huge growth of learning just how to figure out a way to tell stories, even when there is no language for it. There are no standards for it. There was like, everyone tries to make virtual reality storytelling analogous to regular filmmaking, and it doesn't exist. That doesn't work. You have to like think, yeah, maybe that little piece works, a little of that works. So I talk to this guy, I talk to that person, and you kind of figure it all out. And so I've really felt like for the first time that we were in a true Wild Wild West again in filmmaking, but in this time in stereoscopic 360, and how do you move the camera? How do you do all these different things? It's just been a fun thing to experiment with. And now lately I've been working with another friend of mine who was on here yesterday on the yesterday's panel, Adrian Driscoll from Collimation.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I work on doing social VR experiences. So we're using platforms like AltSpace VR and now saying like, well, it's not just a single experience. How do you do storytelling inside of an experience where you have 50 people standing next to you? What is that like?
Right.
How is that immersive? And so it's just like, again, then we're like, well, I want, then we start talking to people like the artist who wants to like perform there. And then she's like, well, I want it to be a Brooklyn basketball court. And we're like,
right.
Okay. So then I go and make this 3D thing. And then I find this artist, Dan Lish, who does the graffiti, and I put it on there. And next thing you know, she's like, this is better than she ever expected.
That's awesome.
Audience just loved it. So it's just a cool, rewarding experience to share and collaborate with people. And I think that's like what makes me wake up every day just wanting to do this.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Liz, considering the longevity that you've used Kickstarter, has that changed in terms of your rubric for when to go to such a platform?
So I work at Kickstarter, meaning like, yeah. So, I mean, when people come to Kickstarter, it's kind of dependent on the specifics of their project. And in film, we see everything between, development, early development through like community screening tours and everything in between. Usually on Kickstarter, folks are raising to get from like point A to point B in their production. It's never really like the full budget, just because films are super expensive, as everybody knows. But if you're doing a short, it might be different. But yeah, so it kind of depends. I often get asked that question, like, when should I do my Kickstarter campaign, that kind of thing. And I always say, like, you should really like lean into, when do you think you're going to have the most time to really spend on this? I know you're never going to have like a month where you're just doing nothing, and you might as well just do a Kickstarter. But like, it is a lot of work, and Terrence and Keith, you can speak to that. But to the extent that you can, like, it's going to take some time. So I would just prioritize a month when you can dedicate yourself to it.
I like that. Now, you started off early on with Kickstarter at a time where we weren't really sure what a crowdfunding platform was. What made you decide to trust that process and go with it?
It just seemed like it had a lot of good energy and momentum going towards it. It was early days, but we still had like a couple of projects that had raised $1 million from
awesome.
Like, several thousand people coming together. The internet is always amazing at pooling like niche communities together. And it just seemed like a very like sort of obvious next evolution in just how projects are getting funded.
I love that. I love that. So obviously my background is in comics, so I have a little bit of a specific intro when it comes to using crowdfunding and or fan base building. When it comes to movies, how do you guys approach that? How do you approach introducing yourself and your creativity to an audience? And Harold, I want to start with you on that one.
That's interesting because I couldn't say I've done it for a movie of my own yet, right? So right now, I'll talk about the book. Sure. Kingston: The Magician's Lost and Found. So we, that's been 9-10 years in the making. Like we came up with a manuscript first and got it to Amazon and almost thought it was about to go to a pilot that didn't work out. And then we got it to Jane, our book agent, and she got us in the room with all the major editors in New York, and Penguin Random House came on, Stacy Barney. And so, you go through this process, and it's a very kind of like quiet process of like just you and your other co-writers writing this thing. And then you're like, well, how's everybody going to know about it?
Right.
Like, so is that, and I'm not from the publishing world, so how do I know what they're going to do? You know what I mean? So we kind of started up our own kind of like internet campaign. So we got together and we started like doing some backstory on some of the real Black magicians that are present in the book. There's like writing this book, it's about a Black kid who loses his father in a magic battle in Brooklyn. magical Brooklyn neighborhood in Brooklyn called Echo City, but he never believes that his dad disappeared. So he actually gets a chance to go back and find out that his dad didn't, and that he's out there doing some really good for the world.
Wow.
And he has to join in that experience. So in doing that, we discovered that there were real Black magicians out there that I had no idea existed. And so we kind of did our internet campaign and built up little videos about them, and we got together with other real magicians that are prevalent today, and we did some more internet videos and panels and stuff like that. And so we got a lot of like word of mouth out that way, and I just felt like, again, it was really cool. It's like you go from something that's just like words on a paper, and it turns into meeting new people, collaborating, and it helps bring presence to your book and or story. I'll say story.
Yeah.
So I'm just really proud of that we discovered this and discovered meeting these other people, because again, just like I didn't know anything about these other Black magicians who existed, 100 years ago.
Right.
And I was able to kind of like introduce other magicians that are working today to the public today through kind of collaboration.
That's brilliant, actually. Experiential marketing, that's such a avant-garde move, to look at something and say, here's the general thing, here's how I fit into this equation, but here's the rest that you guys don't even know. If anybody's listening, write that down. That is a literal gem, jewel. Make a chain out of that one and wear it all the time. That was brilliant. I love that. I'm literally writing that down myself. I'm not gonna lie. Terrence, Keith, you guys want to jump in on that?
Keith, you want to answer and I'll color in this on?
Yeah. So, I mean, similar to Harold, I actually think Harold, your co-writer, is my mentor at the program, but we'll talk about some other time. So one thing that I would say is, I started on the page. But one thing that Terrence knows is that I am obsessive about all things queer movie related. And so I think it was really exciting when Terrence reached out to me, because although most of my experience was in creating these powerful narratives on the page, on the stage, me and Terrence quickly developed a shorthand and a language based on what he was learning in film school to really think about not just the possibilities of storytelling, but that there are very clear constraints in both mediums. So there are certain things that you can't do on the page that you can do on film, and vice versa. And that the true power of that is to actually be able to use those as opportunities to then drive storytelling faster. And a lot of kind of the conversations that Terrence and I had were around really drawing that line and saying, hey, let's say this for the novel, let's use this for film. So I'll toss it to you, Terrence.
Yeah, so I'll kind of jump into what Keith was saying. So, we were in a very specific situation where we had a finite number of funds through grants that we had, one of which was from Spike Lee. But that, we had bought airplane tickets to go down to Savannah, Georgia for the live action shoot. And so, obviously the pandemic put a halt on all of that. And so immediately I said, let's take the funds that we have, let's chop that to a third, and let's consider that our budget to play in the world of animation. And so that's the budget that we presented to Powerhouse Animation Studios. It was somewhere around the 4K kind of space. And our intention was to make a sort of rough animatic, a 2.5 minute, or at the time it was like one minute animatic, 30-second animatic, off of the script that we had, right? How do we just bring this to life? And, we always knew that the goal would be that we knew we needed more funds. And so whatever we were going to do with this animatic, we knew that the next step would be to use it to help generate more funds. Natalie Harris, one of our producers, happened to meet with Liz, I think for an interview for Kickstarter, where Liz shared about Kickstarter's Long Story Short campaign, which was new at the time. It came out in 2020. They had another one, I believe, recently, but it was sort of at the top of March. If you don't know about it, I definitely encourage you to look into it. But they would be kind of like blasting out and kind of hyper, focusing on their page stories or projects that were trying to raise funding during that period of the Long Story Short campaign, and specifically, with an eye to underrepresented groups, underrepresented stories. And so we knew that was like perfect for us. And so while we were kind of brainstorming in the fall of 2020, before we were to launch in 2021, in March, in the springtime, we used that time to figure out, okay, we have our animatic, right? What other things can we bring to this to help tell our story? Because at the end of the day, we're storytellers. And what I love about Keith and his marketing background is we immediately started to think about, what is our color story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the stories? I always said, from a script writing place, I wanted Pretty to feel like a breath of fresh air. I wanted it to feel like something people could watch again and again. It takes place in the early 2000s, and there's so much of it that brings this nostalgic kind of vibe to it. And so we went back to Powerhouse while they were developing the animatic and said, hey, we want to bring some color into this, right? We want to show people a glimpse of what the final product might look like. And so we talked to them about developing some style frames. And, thankfully, I had that approach that I had of, we have a budget, let's kind of quarter it and kind of use those funds. We were able to have a little bit of funding left over to invest in style frames, which went a huge, long way. Amazing. We also brought on a graphic designer and just thought about, even the headers, right? We were studying things like Hair Love's Kickstarter campaign to see, like, what are these little elements that we can bring that help communicate and tell our story, but that also will get the audience that we're trying to get this out to excited, right? And we knew that we don't see a lot of these images every day. I'm sure they exist somewhere in the deep interwebs, but they're not as accessible. And so how do we take advantage of this long story short campaign and the resources and the funds that we have to tell our unique story and bring our unique perspective to the widest audience possible?
Listen, again, there's so much like wealth and knowledge that's being dropped right now. Let me restate that for the folks in the back. Number one, proof of concept. It doesn't have to be the huge project. All you need is just a little bit to show people where you're going. And also having a diverse group of expertise on your team. Keith has marketing experience. Terrence is in film. Bring those together and you can make more happen together than you can apart. I love that. We do have some questions coming in from the audience, and I'm going to kind of do these out of order because some of them I think are a little bit more pertinent. Lola Akins asks, how do you build your community before you launch your Kickstarter campaign, which I think is a huge conversation piece. And obviously, Liz, we want to hear some insights from a Kickstarter perspective on that, but obviously you have some from a filmmaker perspective as well. So please jump in with that.
I actually would love to kick this to Terrence and Keith.
Oh, okay, sure.
Because they did such an amazing job with Pretty and their campaign. They had like close to 4,000 backers supporting that project. So
good job. Good job.
I'll toss that to Keith, who has such strong community-centered focus coming out of Georgia. So go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, so y'all, the most organic way is to sit down and think literally about everybody you know or could know or almost know. I think at that point we were looking at TV, we were looking, thinking about church, we were thinking about everything, and everyone on the team put together a list. And they started there by saying, okay, now these people have to know at least 3 other people.
Right.
And so the thing that I'll point out is that we were strategic though about when. When do we reach out to people? How do we reach out? And also we knew very quickly who could give us something and who couldn't, and what they could give us. And so I think sometimes when you're doing this process, it's no different from community or cultural organizing where you are thinking about people's assets and expertise first. You're not just running out and saying, hey, help. No, you're saying, hey, I see you did this thing. Can you help me with this? So everything from us trying to build out the team to get animators, et cetera, no matter how those relationships happened, no matter whether we could bring someone on board or not, we always said, hey, we believe in the value of your work and would love for you to be a part of this journey, this village, regardless. And so I think starting there allowed us to be able to reach out. And by the time we were done, we were able to do mini launches on the quarters to that process to the point that when it was all said and done, we were able to do in Savannah a media call out with the mayor singing our tagline with like the LGBTQ task force and all that kind of stuff. And it's because in doing so, we talked to people first just about what it was before we even had an ask. And at that point, people began to volunteer the ways that they believe they could help.
That's amazing.
I'll color in really quickly there too. When we were doing the live action, something that was super unique about it then was that we were shooting in a part of Savannah, Georgia that often, shoots were not happening in. And it was very important to us that we were utilizing the community. We were shooting at a community pool. And we wanted kids from the neighborhood to be involved, to take part. We wanted kids who were interested in filmmaking to have access to see, how these things would work. Because for Keith and I, it's like, if we're telling a story that's, all about, healing and being seen, on camera, right? Like on screen, it needs to also be happening behind camera as well. And so, you know, we built this really beautiful community of folks from that neighborhood and from that environment and from, you know, SCAD and neighboring areas as well. And so one of the things that we wanted to keep in mind as we were sharing to this wider audience and moving into animation, not to forget about that community that, you know, we knew we wouldn't be able to represent in the way that we had originally thought.
Right.
But, you know, we did small things like making the animatic, you know, available to them first, right? And allowing them to feel like they're participating in this launch that was taking place. And so we tried to keep that community focus really top of mind.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Harold, did you want to throw in anything? Thoughts on that?
You know what? And in fact, I just learned a ton from these two brothers right here.
Me too. Me too.
So, I gotta say, I haven't quite run a Kickstarter campaign yet. So
we'll get you there. We're gonna throw you in.
Now I'm definitely gonna follow your tactics.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Liz, any other thoughts that you want to tackle into the back end of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying that, like, obviously the Kickstarter campaign from when you launch to when you end is going to require a lot of focus and sort of a lot of communication across many different channels and people. But a lot of the work also comes in advance. And it's like what Keith was saying, like having those, knowing when to have those conversations, knowing that like there is going to be a nuance to one conversation you're having with one group of people that you know in one certain way and another in another way. Thinking also about those conversations as long-term like investments in your community. This is not just like a one-off, like, please just give me your money for this one period of time. Like these are going to be people that are going to be sitting at your screening when your film is done, like cheering you on and helping you push this out. So these are long-term relationships that you're building with the community. And it's really about like putting in the time that requires and sort of demands in advance of launching so that you can do right by those relationships.
I love that. Now, as a quick follow-up, we've got Liz Liu asks, how do you spend time maximizing the effect of your Kickstarter campaign for that month? So you've got this lead in. How do you maximize during? Who wants to jump on that one?
So I can kick this part off, and I'm gonna punt it to you, Chance, because the reality is that we worked so hard, y'all. I don't even remember. I just know we did it. It was so intense. So the first thing I will say is that we phased how we would reach out to people, but we also learned by studying. We had this deep list of all campaigns that raised over a certain amount of money, and like we were studying it like homework. And what we learned is that there is a wave. So within the first few days, it is madness. Everyone is giving, and then there's a slump. There's a plateau. And if you don't know that plateau is coming, you think you're done. That's it. We out of the game. And so for us, we had to segment our list to actually reach out to those people who were ready and the most on fire. We didn't reach out to them first. Right. We just did the awareness first. And then so when that slump happened, we were like, oh my God, it's here. Oh Lord. Then we reached out to those people and they kind of fused it with a different level of excitement. And then there was the final piece, which was especially when you reach your stretch goals, if you're fortunate to do that, kudos. Then begin to reach back to your people and tell them, hey, we are almost there. We're near this piece. And then that's when you kind of have the free for all. It is super important that if you have media, that you build those relationships far in advance and that you never underestimate who can pass the word. I mean, we had kids in schools, making announcements, right? And so just know that every voice counts. And then if you understand that and you're strategic about that, people will begin to shout to the heavens in ways that you just never expected. Terrence, anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say, because, a big part of all of this, again, like that's a lot, right? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of, it's meticulous and thought through, and we got full-time jobs. You know what I mean? We had other things going on as well. And so one of the ways that we created that infrastructure for ourselves, because it was just myself, Keith, and two other producers, kind of making this happen, doing these kind of cold calls and writing people and asking folks to give, sending out emails. The amount of emails that were sent out was crazy. But we met every single Sunday, like I said, kind of in the months leading up to, or every other Sunday in the months leading up to, and then every kind of week almost, or every day almost in the days leading up to our kind of start. So we had already planned out, we're going to post on this day, and we're going to save this color frame for this day. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to give them this until this day. Right. And so, just kind of not giving everything all at once, but just kind of understanding that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and just kind of holding on to certain things that we wanted to share until we were ready to. And so thankfully, because we had that preparation time, we were able to create those digital assets in advance, create those posts in advance, so that all we had to do on the day of was to kind of post. Because a cool fun fact is, like, and the reason why Keith doesn't remember is because in the middle of all of that, Keith and I were also shooting a proof of concept independent TV pilot.
Wow.
That Keith was producing. And so it was sheer madness, but we were able to get it all done because of the organization.
Love that. Absolutely love that. We've got a couple more questions, so I want to make sure we get those out. Carlos Simple, and this is an interesting one, asks, how important is merchandising when crowdfunding or pitching IP? And I think this is a wide open question, because when it comes to merchandising, there's not really a set limitation on what that actually means. Like, merchandising can be a lot of things. So what do you guys think in terms of that? Harold, I'm curious, in terms of what you've done, how much merchandising or IP management have you had experience with?
Merchandising. So the way I understand merchandising, it would be like you make a t-shirt or something like that, or have some stuff like hats and stuff. A lot of my stuff has been client-based.
Okay.
So I kind of help them figure that kind of stuff out. And like,
got you.
But I'm kind of in a way, well, like, think of like creative things to help other folks figure, do that kind of stuff. For our own projects, we've been on a more traditional film hunt kind of thing, getting to know agents and managers and kind of getting our stuff out there into that place. So it's been a little different type of a journey for us. But I would say, just like the way I would approach merchandising, if I were to do it that way, I would say that always after your story is done, get your story done, get your story right first, and then I would go for it, because I find that's a great way of kind of recouping some of the funds that you're going to spend on things like that. And at the same time, it's going to be a great way to get people to kind of like love your project. But the only thing about it is, like, how do you fund that if you're also trying to fund your project?
Right.
So I'm just a little curious to hear from someone who actually has done it, to figure out how do you solve that problem.
Gotcha. Of course. Do you guys have merch available? Pretty hats, shirts? Where can I get one? Just go ahead and say it. I'm listening.
So just a quick thing I would say is that we thought that one of the most strategic things you could do in a Kickstarter is know your perks, which is the term. We studied everyone else's perks, like, again, down to the science. And then I got my graphic designers we as a team figured out, what would we buy first? Because you gotta, if you're not your own client, then who is? And then we began to think, it was assigning the value to certain perks, which was the hardest part. Because when you think about the way Kickstarter is designed, certain perks bring in more money. And so, to kind of speak to the note that Harold was saying, we had to think very meticulously about at what point, based on what people would donate, would we be able to set aside money to then be able to pay and create those perks without cannibalizing the larger budget, and also the manpower, because once you get the funds, you still have to do the thing over the course of things. So we were very strategic about that. The final thing I'll just say is, people love t-shirts, y'all. They love t-shirts, and hoodies are magic. Do not have a hoodie be the same price as a t-shirt, and postcards are like gold. So if you think about the production value of those things, then it'll get you pretty far. Terrence, what you think?
Yeah, this is where having the right people on your team comes in handy, because Keith's background in project management and having a graphic designer that he could reach out to really went the mile here. I think my biggest thing, as on the director side, and kind of like understanding that this is going beyond, like, this is on the fringes of what I can, of my bandwidth and my manpower. I just kind of cautioned the team. I was like, hey, let's remember that when this is all done and we raise our funds, that these are still items that are going to have to be mailed out, created, sent out, right? And I wanted to just make sure that we weren't overextending ourselves, right? That we would have ultimately the bandwidth to complete and actually get out the things that we needed. So thankfully, again, that took a whole nother preparation of planning. So I would say another thing to keep in mind is when you say those perks are going to be available, because they're not available yet.
Right.
But thankfully, you know, we've gotten a lot done in this amount of time that I think if we were worrying about perks would have been even more difficult. So now we're at a position where we can begin to worry about perks, and those are going to be on the way.
Genius. I love that.
Can I ask,
yeah, please.
So Keith and Terrence, would you guys like use things like for, like we said, t-shirt, hoodie, things like Society6? Like how are you, like, are there like websites out there where you're able to do like an account where you can upload and it's like cost effective? Like what sites would you use to kind of like do that?
Two things, Harold. Reach out to a graphic designer, because if you tell somebody a thing, they can make it, and sometimes they'll do it pro bono. Like they know how to slap it on the thing. And then they also, we did do some research on like certain sites, but the reality is that you won't know how you can do it until you kind of figure out how much money you have. And so I think what I would say is put together the visual, see if you get some perks. So we had like this really like sexy lookbook, like coffee table book, and I just wanted millions of those. And like we didn't need to make those. So if I had been pricing all of that, it's exponentially, you know, expensive to do a coffee table book. So I would say get the sales first, get the people to sign up, and then based on the amount that you've allotted for the budget, then you can reverse engineer to see what site is best based on fabric, quality, price per unit, stuff like that.
Brilliant. Okay, this one's an interesting one. So Poseidon Magna is an independent manga creator, got their first chapter done and available digitally. How do they translate into getting their stories funded for animation as an adaptational sort of piece? Do they just continue to sell copies and hope the right person comes along? Or is there a pipeline for acquisitions, you know, anything like that you guys would recommend?
I would say if you want to go into animation, again, I come from the bootstrapping kind of world of like jump in, put it into After Effects or Premiere, Final Cut, whatever, cut it together and put some sound design and some music to it. See what an animatic will sound like or feel like. Do some simple moves. I mean, the tools have come together so well nowadays that you can put that kind of thing together easier than when we first started out. And you know, sometimes people don't take the time to read. So if they hear something that, you know, like this way I always approach marketing is like try and bring someone from outside the room into the room to see what's on the screen. So sound is super important, you know, like really kind of like push it that way and, you know, try or find someone to help you animate just a little proof of concept and get that out there. Then you can put it on Kickstarter and run a campaign and get it going that way, or find a, you know, the long tough road of trying to find an agent or market or some other kind of person that kind of gets you in the door.
I respect that completely. Just keep the energy going. Deca Dev asks, and Liz, this one's going to be for you. How do you get on projects we love? And is this special or important? Now, as a comic creator, I've seen lots of projects. I've been fortunate enough to earn a Projects We Love sticker. So let the people know the value of that sentiment.
Yeah, so just to sort of Projects We Love is basically like the staff pick button on Kickstarter, and it essentially just affects the algorithm of how projects are populated on the page for when people arrive on Kickstarter. The ones that are Projects We Love are going to be higher and up and a little bit more visible. So it is useful, and I think people will often come to the Kickstarter and sort of sort by Projects We Love just to look at what's new and what's really going to be great. The way those are selected, we have an editorial team on staff that basically knows what's launching every day, checks in on every category, make sure that the sort of best and brightest projects are tagged appropriately. Things that we're looking for typically are like a really great project video, really compelling, like high-res images that pepper your page, thoughtful descriptions of what it is that you're putting together, like a well-conceived plan for what it is that you're trying to do, whether it's a comic book or a film or a gadget in tech and design, having a plan in place, thoughtful rewards that are meaningful for your community, that make it make sense for what you're doing, that kind of thing. I just wanted to mention, sorry, that we currently also have a fund going right now, that is run through Creative Capital and the Skull Foundation, where starting in last October through October of this year, they are putting in micro donations up to 10 grand per project for BIPOC creators on Kickstarter for any project in any category. Up to 10 grand per project, and they have committed to $500,000 in total. Brilliant. So if you're ever thinking like maybe I'll run a campaign now, like do it before October, because it is a real, and it's, the application is really like lightweight, on like designed to be so just throwing that out there.
Oh, that's brilliant. I can tell you a lot of creators have no idea that that's available. So thank you for that. I know we are getting close to time, so I want to give everyone an opportunity to let everyone else know where we can find you on social media, and we can continue this conversation individually if we get the opportunity. Terrence, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is honestly, like I said, like the time of my life. It's been an incredible journey. You can find me at Instagram, Terrence D Day. And you can also find us everywhere. Pretty not pretty. That's spelled PRITTY, not pretty, PRETTY. And you can follow us on Instagram and kind of learn more from there. Our animatic is out. That kind of 2.5 minute animatic is out and available. And Keith actually has some really exciting news of his own, so I'll let him share that. But yeah, please follow us. There's still opportunities to give. We have just completed the full animatic, but we're hanging on to that and developing our post sound work on that, and getting ready to make steps for the animation process. So
that's awesome.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
So you can find me. You can find both of us, like we said, on Pretty Not Pretty on Instagram, and also Twitter, right? And you can find me at Keith F. Miller Jr., just my name, on Instagram. One thing that I think is really powerful and exciting to share is that the other part of the story around Kickstarter is that Kickstarter not only allowed us to find a community for the work, but it also got a lot of traction. And so actually on the first day of Kickstarter, of our campaign, I actually got reached out to by a literary agent, which was wonderful. And then the second day, I actually heard from HarperCollins. And so that was like really, really exciting, right? And now I happen to also have been in the MFA program, rewriting and all that fun stuff. So that was happening. But as of a couple of days ago, it was officially announced that I actually closed out a multi-book deal with HarperCollins. As a result of that.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Which, as you all know, only creates more opportunities to do multiple multimedia motion picture work, graphic novels, etc. And so we're really excited to be able to take that and get this animatic financed and animated, but also many other types of projects. So thank you all.
Yeah, so I'll just say that was something that Keith had sitting on his desktop for 12 years that people had said they loved but did not, had essentially rejected it. And so it's been a beautiful Cinderella story, and it's thanks to places like Kickstarter and the supporters that we found there. So thank you again, and proud of you, Keith.
I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. Harold?
Hey, so I just want to say thank you for having me on this panel. To meet all of you has actually been very educational to me, and I'm very excited to kind of like take this knowledge and kind of do some of the other projects I have rock and rolling on my desktop. Congratulations to you, Keith and Terrence, and really I can't wait to check out your project. You guys can find me at SunnyBoyInt on Instagram, and that's all one thing. And I'm also on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Liz?
Yeah, you can write me, just liz@kickstarter.com, or if you forget that, it's just film@kickstarter.com, and it comes to me and my colleague. To the extent that we can, we want to be as available to anyone with questions about how to run a campaign on Kickstarter for their specific projects. So like I met with Natalie for Pretty, like I'm really, really happy to meet with folks. So please feel free. Yeah, Liz@kickstarter.com.
This has been absolutely amazing. What a perfect way to close things out. I got to thank everyone, the hosts for the AfroAnimation Summit. You guys have been fantastic. I got to thank Kickstarter for being one of the sponsors. Brought so much. Like this is a huge opportunity. Once again, I'm Victor Dandridge. You can find me at Vantage In-House on all forms of social media. If you want to continue conversations, I want to stay in touch with everybody here just because I feel like this is a space of big things happening, and I like to be on the ground floor of that. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I believe we've got who's coming up next. Is Trevon coming up next? Rio's back. Hey, Rio's back. Yay!
I'm kind of everywhere.
Nothing wrong with that.
So, Victor, I knew we had the right person to close out AfroAnimation. I mean, your energy is infectious.
Thank you.
Terrence and Keith, I mean, congratulations. There's so many people in the audience of about 600, kept going up. They're excited about your story. They're excited about, the questions there were a ton of questions that say, what do I do now? How do I stop doubting that my work is any good? Keith had 12 years to keep doubting and he didn't. And look, he's got an amazing announcement with HarperCollins. So congratulations.
Awesome.
We love hearing that. Liz, I mean, your just calm demeanor is infectious. I think people be prepared for your email to blow up. I think a lot of folks learned some good things today. They thought that maybe, okay, I throw up some stuff on Kickstarter, it'll take a day or so, and the money will just keep running in. I mean, it's nice to know that there is a strategy behind it. There is a process. And, if you're lucky, you're like Terrence and Keith, where you get funding for a project where it just starts to blossom. So congratulations to everyone. Harold, I've checked out your website, the kind of projects that you guys have been involved in. I'm super proud to know you, and thank you for coming on to the panel.
Appreciate you.
We love ending a day like today because, like I said, you guys have provided just information to everybody trying to fund their independent projects. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more housekeeping. Again, thank you, Victor. Bye, Keith. Okay, so that wraps the programming, the official on-stage programming for AfroAnimation for right now. We have another hour of networking and recruiting. So again, a lot of folks have been asking, how do I do this? How do I do that? What, can I ask DreamWorks Animation something? Can I ask Mainframe something? If they're not in their booth to the left of you on Hopin, then there should be an email. There should be a link somewhere. So please go into our studio sponsor booths and ask your questions. Get in line. Yesterday I, jumped around every single booth and I was like 97th in line at one point. But they're there. They're there to talk to you. They're there to answer your questions. They have people staffing those booths. So please go into the sponsored booths. And then in an hour, what time is it? 2 o'clock in the West, so 5 o'clock in the East. So in 1 hour, 6 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. West Coast time, we will be awarding our finalists. We'll be announcing the finalists for the film festival, and we are going to award 3 prizes. So the top prize is $5,000, and the second and third place winners get to choose from different tools and licenses that are several $100s in value. So we'd love to be able to, provide these prizes to folks. And we'd love for everybody, even though voting is closed, we'd love for you guys to go into the AfroAnimation screening room and the film festival booth and just check out some of the work that your colleagues are doing. So again, thank you so much. We'll meet you in recruiting and networking. Over to the left, just hit the expo button or the networking button. And then you'll go into a bunch of the stuff we have going for you, and we'll see you in an hour. And hopefully you'll get a chance to check out some of the films.